couldn't be for certain, but you gave the tip off. They go in the next day, but you're still in there? Or you went back in there? And what's never made sense to me is that Jay sent screenshots, but he never took photos. The only way that can make sense is if you was actually planting that body. Because there was one person, one key person behind this whole operation that allowed a person like Ayub Hussein to get deemed irrelevant within 24 hours. That is just not normal. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, we are back again with another interesting Jay SLATER video. I hope every single one of you are doing well. It was only a few weeks ago where Chris Tenerife done a live with Electric Paramedic on TikTok. It was something that I did want to bring to your attention a number of weeks ago, but there were pieces of the puzzle that we were connecting at that point. Then we've moved into the inquest, and the inquest has given us a clearer insight into the facts of this case. So I thought it would make sense now to go back to the Chris Tenerife live to hear what he had to say and share my opinion based on that. I also think it can give us some perspective, especially where we know so much more about the case than we did prior to the inquest. I also believe we're going to find 2, maybe 3 things in what Chris says that just don't make any sense and are extremely questionable. So let's check this out.
He also said, or words to this effect, and we got the interview, so we don't need to analyze every word I say. Okay, so we got the interview. But he said there was a group of people that went down.
At this point, just to give you guys some context, I believe he's talking about Cipriano Martin. This is the leader of the rescue mission.
The lowest point in the mountain, essentially, to what we now know as the V-notch. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he said at that point, they would have met challenges and they didn't have ropes to get down the cliffs in order to be able to search properly. Therefore,
It's really interesting where he says, kind of don't quote me on this. Because when Cipriano Martin does his interview talking about the cliffs and needing ropes and a harness, he doesn't mention anything about the V-notch. V-notch, the word V-notch has been made up by Chris. Cipriano Martin did say that there was a point that they got to where they couldn't go any further because they would need ropes and a harness to get down. And therefore, they didn't believe Jay would have went down there. So they continued to move on and search other areas. Now, based on the story that Cipriano Martin was given, it made sense for him to have made that decision because he wasn't looking for a drunk, waved out of his face Jay. Remember, the story that was being painted is that Jay was compos mentis. We're looking for a brisk walking Jay, walking confidently up the hill.
He would have had to have turned back that day and come back up. And that was an indication to me that, okay, just because you know it's dangerous and just because you know your team wasn't equipped doesn't mean that Jay didn't go that way. So that was...
It's so weird that he mentions that because for one, he's talking as if Cipriano Martin was referring to him being at the bottom of something and he couldn't go any further, so he had to turn back and walk back up. As far as I remember, Cipriano Martin didn't mention anything about going down to something and then not being able to go any further, so they walk back up. One thing I did say months ago is that I did believe Chris Tenerife and whoever he was working with had used Little Miss Vodka's narrative, and he also looked at interviews from the Guardia Civil and then more or less claimed that the body is where the Guardia Civil claimed it wouldn't be. Now, the people that have been following this channel for a very, very long time, you guys will remember we've done that video and I mentioned that Little Miss Vodka's maps would have been created off the back of Brad doing his interview. After that, Chris Tenerife fully takes charge of the rescue mission and everyone else that was involved in the rescue, other than DTR, is no longer involved. Even DTR at that point was slightly brushed to the side because they realized he was no longer needed. But at that point, I said, Chris and whoever he was working with, Sluggy the side chick and that lot, they have got their hands on Little Miss Vodka's maps because exactly what Chris started to tell us later on in the July is exactly what Little Miss Vodka was telling us at the end of June. We had Chris and his side chick throwing the Guardia Civil under the bus. He started throwing the Guardia Civil under the bus. And we're thinking, hold on, ain't you guys meant to be working with the Guardia Civil? They had listened to everything that Cipriano Martin had said about the rescue mission, and they identified something that Cipriano Martin said, which they could use against the Guardia Civil. And that would have been an area where they didn't check because Jay would have needed ropes and a harness. At that point, I was standing on the side of the fence that Jay's body had been planted. I was fully leaning towards Jay's body had been planted, and these guys are involved in doing that. They used Little Miss Vodka's maps. They used the Guardia Civil's interviews to identify an area the Guardia Civil hadn't searched. And then they blamed the Guardia Civil to make it look like they hadn't done their job correctly, which in turn makes them look like the heroes. And the body is coincidentally found in the area the Guardia Civil said he wouldn't have gone in shorts and a t-shirt because you need ropes and a harness to get down there. Now, a content creator, True Crime Science Rocket, he actually went to Masca recently, in the mountains, walking through the mountains. And in fact, never been there before, he made it down to the Masca beach safely. I mean, I want to take a look at that video because it will give us a clearer insight into the depth of the mountains and how deep he had to go, paths that he took, and so on and so forth. It will give us more of an insight. When you look at the areas that the Guardia Civil refer to as areas that you would need rope and a harness to get to, you can clearly see that it's easy for anyone to be pushed into that area, anyone to be thrown into that area. And of course, to not be biased, anyone could slip and fall in that area. So in my opinion, Jay never slipped. It wasn't an accident. I believe Jay was taken there as form of punishment. And that could be due to the minor drug debt. The reason as to why his bank account declined shortly before Hodgie asked him to take that 2-ton out of his account. Hours later, we see Jay so waved out of his face, so incapacitated, that the only next destination for him is finding a corner to throw up in or finding a corner to sleep in. Or even worse, just falling unconscious altogether. I have so much information and so much evidence that points to it not being an accident. It doesn't make sense as to why people like Chris will be extremely adamant that they believe it's an accident, although they claim they haven't done no investigative work. Their claim to this being an accident is, I was on the ground in the ravine and I know what it's like. Okay, cool. Hundreds of thousands of people that have been in that same area and they know what it's like, and a majority of those people don't believe it's an accident.
A red flag for me. That was like, hang on a minute, what if this guy, this young lad who didn't know the terrain, who's never been there before, who didn't know where he was going, has used a landscape, has taken him down into the watercress, gravity's taken him along the path of least resistance, he's gone to the V-notch.
Path of least resistance was leaving that Airbnb and going downhill. Why would Jay walk uphill to the viewpoint and decide to cut off road to walk through a ravine and then take the path of least resistance? If that was Jay's thought process, that would have been his thinking when he left the Airbnb. And I don't believe the Google Map theory whatsoever. Even if he did follow Google Maps, all that would have done was take him to the viewpoint. He would have realized at that point, this is insane. It makes no sense. Brad's on the phone telling me to get a cab. Let me just get this cab. Let me just get this cab and bunk it. But no, what we're going to say at this point is because of the drugs that Jay had been consuming hours before, his judgment was clouded. Drugs made him make the wrong decisions. You know, we say the drugs made him make the wrong decisions, but he knew how to ask all the people outside about the bus times. He knew that his phone needed a charger when he went into the Airbnb, hence why he asked Ayub for the charger, according to Ayub. Again, Jay was able to take a picture of himself in the back of a car and rewrite the message without a typo. But when he got to the viewpoint, the drugs that Jay had consumed, they interfered with his decision-making. When the easiest decision could have been just wait where you are, come and get me, call a cab, go back to the Airbnb if everything's cool over there. Ayub, give me a lift. Ophelia, can you call me a cab? Actually, I'll just wait for the bus. Or if I want to walk, I'll just go the right way and head towards civilization.
He doesn't know this quest there. The head of the search knows because he knows it's dangerous. But
Can
Jay
I ask
didn't.
a question?
Of course,
They didn't know. I mean, you can see that it's dangerous. Like I said, we're going to look at the content creator that went there recently and look at their footage. They got to the bottom of the mountain without any qualms. We'll see what it looks like, and you're telling me that Jay didn't know how dangerous it was. It was clear to see how dangerous it was. But like I said to you guys, it felt to me months and months and months ago, and I'm starting to feel the same way again, after rewatching this live with Chris Tenerife talking about his side of the story, and there's more to go. There's more things that Chris Tenerife says on this live that make me think, well, the only way that can make sense is if you was actually planting that body. Don't worry, we're going to get to it, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure you hit the like button. Do subscribe to the channel if we are newly watching.
Mike, I'm not trying to paint a narrative. I'm just expressing my experience. And I can only say what I lived and what I experienced or what I went through.
You're not trying to paint a narrative. You've tried to tell us what Jay was thinking. He took the path of least resistance is what you tried to tell us. That is painting a narrative, isn't it? That isn't giving us your experience as a hiker. You told us what Jay would have been thinking. And these are the reasons as to why Jay would have made these decisions. That's what was being said by yourself. So you are more or less painting a narrative.
I can't speak for other people because to do that, I would be lying. Yeah. And the only thing I've ever done which would take me away from my experience and my observations and my time on the ground up there was I tried to put myself in the mindset of Jay, assuming, very, very key word there. I never said this word assuming. I probably should have, but assuming he was at the points where I was on the landscape.
Okay. And where did you get those points from? Little Miss Vodka.
And what we did is we went off the very, very limited information. No, just so you guys know, and I'll come clean on this. We needed help. We wanted help. We wanted more information when we were up there to help us, one, for our own safety, and two, to help find Jay for the family. And
which we were more than grateful to do.
Yeah. And when I was up there, even the Guardia Civil, there was Guardia Civil police up there once the official search had been stopped. And they said, look, we're now not allowed to enter. But if you need us for anything, Chris, we're here. Ring us, contact us. I had to leave someone at the end of the path because once you go down off-road, you lose signal and you lose GPS. So there was no way of me contacting people. The Guardia Civil flew a helicopter over me twice while I was down there to let me know their presence was there. They were trying to reassure me that we're still here. If you get in trouble, signal us. I had flares on me, so signal us.
I'm really struggling to understand why Chris is the guy that the Guardia Civil are putting their money on to go into this ravine and get Jay's body out. That's meant to be a local lad that's just lived on the island for however many years, but they're deciding to use you over the real experts, the guys that are trained and drilled. They would rather use you over them. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, at this point, we're talking about the rescue mission being called off. If we take ourselves back to when they called the rescue mission off, it was because the Guardia Civil claims they didn't believe Jay was there. Literally, those first 2 weeks, there was no trace of Jay whatsoever. You think about what the Dutch team told us, and this is extremely weird as well, is the moment they landed, they got a scent from Jay's clothes, which was given to them by Debbie. And instantly they was able to get to the point of destination where Jay's body had been found. Well, why wasn't that done in the first 2 weeks with the Guardia Civil's canines? How are you telling me that the Dutch dogs just flew over and within 1 day they was able to get a scent and just go to the location of where the body was? But for the 3 weeks prior to them arriving, nothing. Absolutely nothing. In fact, a week and a half prior to them arriving, the search was called off because they believed Jay wasn't there. So make it make sense for me. It now then takes me back to what I was saying earlier and what I said months ago. That the only way Chris's story makes sense is if you was involved in planting Jay's body there. Even some things that he goes on to mention in this live stream also convince me that the only way this story makes sense is if you was involved in planting the body there. See, the part we're on right now, ladies and gentlemen, for the Guardia Civil not to bring in the experts, the people that have all of the equipment, all of the resources needed to get into that inaccessible area to retrieve a body, they would rather avoid and give all of that workload to Chris and Chris by himself. Oh, with his side chick, that's not even there. He's in an ops room over in Wales. You're telling me that the Guardia Civil was just trying to cut costs. They were just trying to save money. Yeah, we're going to give you the workload. You're the guy. We're going to give all of that workload too. Don't worry, Christo. We'll have 2 helicopters in the sky. They're going to be floating, observing. And anytime you need to get out of there, Chris, you just shoot that flare into the sky and we'll dive in and get you out.
It really was a case of I was not going to stop until I fulfilled my promise to Warren, Zach, and Debbie.
So you wasn't going to stop until you fulfilled your promise to Zach, Warren, and Debbie. And that promise was you were going to find Jay's body. But what gave you the confidence? What made you so adamant after the Guardia Civil called off the search, claiming that the body wasn't there after 2 weeks of them searching? What gave you the confidence? What made you so adamant that Jay's body was there? Ironically, in an area where the Guardia Civil said he wouldn't have gone because he would have needed ropes and a harness, the only area of the mountains the Guardia Civil probably didn't search. Remember, Sluggy the side chick was at the funeral telling random people that the Guardia Civil got caught lying to the family. What is he talking about? What does he mean by that? Does that take us back to perception control? I think it does. The Guardia Civil, without even knowing it, got played as well. Because there was one person, one key person behind this whole operation that allowed a person like Ayub Qasim to get deemed irrelevant within 24 hours. That is just not normal. Especially when there's information and evidence to kind of lead you to believe that something nefarious could have taken place that evening. We look at all of the information that we know today, the changing of the Rolex to the AP, the video to the picture, with the fabricated videos of Jay outside the Airbnb, but you can't see Jay. I mean, it's all BS. Are you telling me that's what the Guardia Civil looked at and said, yeah, you man are cool, don't worry, you're deemed irrelevant, you can fly back to the UK whenever you want? Bearing in mind, if they do fly back to the UK and 2 days later they find out that Jay was stabbed and shot, how the hell are they going to get Ayub and Rocky back to Tenerife? How? They have no jurisdiction. And that's how you know this was a cover-up. That's how you know this is BS. There was no way being the two last people to see Jay that hasn't even been found can be deemed as irrelevant within 24 hours. No way whatsoever. Not even a person on bail or a person on interest. No, in fact, these people are going to be deemed as witnesses. Yeah, they're witnesses. Again, proves, ladies and gentlemen, that this was a cover-up. And all they needed was someone like Chris and Sluggy the side chick to come along and paint this narrative to make it look like Jay took an accidental fall in the mountains.
I only believed Jay was up there having walked the ground, done the orientation, done the research, and then walked the ground. And I was like, oh my God, this poor fucking boy is still here and everyone's given up. And he's going to be left. And imagine the perpetual fucking torture the family's going to be left in.
See, again, I just don't understand what made you feel that way when if you looked at information that was made available, you wouldn't have been this emotionally attached saying, no, actually, I'm going to make a promise to the family that I'm not going to leave these mountains until I bring Jay home. You couldn't have been that confident. There is no way you could have been that confident. The Guardia Civil wasn't even confident. That's why they called the search off.
As someone breaks the back and tries to find him. And for that reason, I kept going. I just so all of you know, right, I've nearly lost my relationship. It's caused havoc with my business. I've got employees contacting me on a daily basis saying, have you seen what's online? You're a murderer, you're head of the mafia, you're a money launderer, a criminal. I've got my dad being attacked online.
Let me just pause it right there. Sounds like he is really trying to get some sympathy here. Giving us a list of negative things that have happened to him off the back of this Jay SLATER case. So weird that he says that, because it was only months ago where he was talking as if he's got bad boy lawyers that are shutting people down, Joseph Morris, Bobs and Bits. Yeah, these are these hungry lawyers that I don't even have to say anything to them. They just want to eat. You know, the moment you do defamation, they're eating. Now he's sitting there giving us this sob story, how everything's just kind of falling to shit for him off the back of him trying to help find the loved one. But he uses specific words here: murderer, money launderer. Out of all of the things that he said there, those are the two big key ones, because many people believe Jay was murdered, but also people believe Jay was involved in some form of money laundering. It's interesting I say that because there's some dots that are really, really connecting behind the scenes at this moment in time. And I think over the next couple of videos, I'm going to be bringing you an exclusive video diving into how I believe this money laundering is actually taking place. There was also crucial information that was sent to me months and months and months ago that kind of back up the theory about how these guys could be money laundering. So, ladies and gentlemen, don't go anywhere. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you're newly watching. Let's listen to the rest of this waffle session.
All I did is I went to go and help a family that was in the worst possible situation you could imagine. One of your kids.
I agree with that, but it seems like he's getting extremely emotional. And that's one thing that I realized Chris was getting throughout this case. Emotional. There was moments where Chris was explaining himself and I can see him getting really teary-eyed. And if you actually go back to the moments where he was getting teary-eyed, he was talking about Jay in such a way where it made me feel like personally, this guy was guilty of doing something. And that's why every time he spoke about it, tears kept coming to his eyes because it was a form of guilt. That's how I was feeling about it. That's the impression that I got from when Chris was getting emotional about certain things he was saying.
I'm missing, and I went to help them, and I've been nothing but crucified for going to help them.
You haven't even been crucified for going to help them. Not at all. You've been crucified for not looking at everything that there is to look at and for actually deeming certain things as fake and fiction, although you have told me personally that you've never investigated what happened to Jay leading up to him going to the Airbnb. You never even investigated what he was doing at the Airbnb and why he would have left the Airbnb in the fashion that he did. You told me all your job was to do was go into that ravine and get the body out. These are the times where I then believed that the screenshots were planted. The screenshots were actually taken by the friends. They went there, they took the screenshots and made us believe Jay sent the screenshots over to them. But it never made sense for Jay to send screenshots over because that would have drained his battery more than the simple method of just pressing a button and forwarding it to whoever you want to forward it to. But what also never made sense to me about Jay sending over screenshots was the fact that there was no pictures found on Jay's phone of him being in those mountains other than the one outside the B&B. If Jay went up that long road the wrong way, cut off road and went into the ravine, we don't even know if he's been cut by a cactus lying in a ditch at that point. If we go based on what Ayub said, he sent the screenshots after that happened. So once Jay fell in a ditch and got cut by the cactus and was telling Lucy he was going to die, that's when he sent the screenshots. But what's never made sense to me is that Jay sent screenshots, but he never took photos. Are you telling me that you're in a position where you're telling Brad, oh, look where I am, all gassed? Second scenario is you're in a position where you've just been cut by a cactus and you're lying in a ditch and you feel like you're going to die, and you've still got battery on your phone in both of those scenarios, but not once did you take a picture of the location that you was at. So you're in the mountains, cool, take a picture. This is what the area looks like that I'm in. Why did that not take place? But he sent screenshots. No photos of the mountain itself, no photos of him in the ravine whatsoever, just one video of him holding this blanket with a cigarette in his hand, showing you that he's in front of the B&B, but when he goes off the wrong way, speaks to Brad and tells Brad all he can see is greenery, he doesn't take no videos or any photos at that point. He falls, cuts himself by a cactus, he's lying in a ditch, and he tells Lucy on the phone that he's gonna die. At that point, he sends her screenshots. But you're telling me he still doesn't even take a photo of where he is at that point. No photo. This is where I am, guys. This is what it looks like. No, I'll just send screenshots of my location. I'm telling you, this is all made up. And there's only two parts that Chris could have played here. Chris could have been manipulated into believing that Jay's body was there and it was an accident. And that's the reason why he's so adamant that it was an accident, because he's bought into information that's been given to him by the likes of Brandon, Ayub. You have to remember, back in July, August, him and Ayub and Sluggy were all in each other's comments. Chris Tenerife actually told Ayub that I was spreading lies and conspiracies and I had been doing it for ages. Remember that? Chris Tenerife at some point had been influenced by Ayub. Therefore, his perception and his attitude was under control. And he was more or less doing what Ayub needed him to do, as well as Sluggy, the side chick. I remember what Sluggy, the side chick, told us, because he's such a little kid and he wants to tell the world everything. He told us that he was the guy that manipulated Chris. Remember, he said that on a video. He tried to call me out, and he said that I got it wrong. It was him. He was the guy that was in Chris's ear, manipulating the way Chris was thinking, what he was feeling, and ultimately what he was believing. And the only other scenario that makes this make sense for Chris is planting the body. So they're the only two things that could have possibly happened. So it's either one, Chris was manipulated into believing a certain thing, or two, Chris is involved in planting Jay's body where it was found.
All I can say is, from my experience on that land, and I've been there shooting videos in the last few weeks, and honestly, if you see the videos, hopefully they'll come out in the documentary. If they don't,
It sounds like Chris is really trying to convince us here that this is an accident. You have to believe, guys, based on the fact that I was on the ground and I was looking around Mascot and I was a part of searching for Jay, you have to believe that this was an accident. It seems like he is totally ignoring all of the red flags. And he is trying to convince us that we should ignore the red flags and focus on what he's telling us, because what he's telling us is the truth. Now, if what he's telling us is the truth, why would Debbie and Warren still be demanding answers?
So you didn't actually locate his body, basically.
You didn't come across him, if we're going to put it bluntly.
Yeah.
At this point in time, I helped find him. What comes out in the future, if the family wants, I respect the family's wishes.
Now, it's
So-
not something
Look,
I
man,
like
it's either you found him or you didn't find him. You respect the family's wishes. The family are still demanding answers. This doesn't make any sense. It seems like Chris is trying to hide something. I think it's him trying to confirm that he never found the body.
What the family want to say, it's not for me to say. It's for the
Yeah.
That's a load of BS.
Duncan Smith had said something about Chris 500 meters away, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
I knew I was very emotional that day, you can imagine. I put all my resources in, put all my effort in. Jay just been found. I was in tears.
Yeah.
I was upset, and Sky rang me and they said, "Can you do an interview with us? We've been told we have to speak to you." I said, "Yes, of course." And they said, "Right."
So they've been told we have to speak to you. Who told them that they have to speak to you? Why you?
You need to go live in 20 minutes. I wasn't at my house, so I had to get home. On the way home, of course, I'm thinking about all the questions they're going to ask me. And I know Sky are going to ask me, where exactly is Jay's body? Did you find it? I knew these questions were coming. So I went on live TV, bear in mind, I'm not a journalist. I'm not prepared in this. I'm not trained in this. But I went on live TV to try and do justice. You want to speak about justice? I bust my ass to try and find him. And then I went on live TV on a minute's notice. Right? Sky TV ring you up and go, "You're live in 20 minutes. How could I say no? Of course I couldn't say no. I had to say yes. So I went live within 20 minutes. On that interview, they asked me, now I'm not a stupid boy, even though Duncan Smith would love you to think I'm a stupid boy, right? I knew that question was coming. When it came, there was no way on God's earth I was going to answer it accurately. Do you know why?
Sorry, what was the question?
The question was, how far did I locate him and how far away was I?
Chris, you said there was a smell. Chris,
Let me
you said on live that you'd noticed a smell.
hang on a
That's
minute.
how you know. Yes, you did. You did.
Hang on a minute. I was never going to answer that question live on Sky TV without speaking to the family first, because it was their right. It was their right to know all of the information before it was broadcast to the world.
But you went on live and said it. That's what I'm asking you.
Before the Sky TV. I beg your pardon. No, I didn't.
Okay.
And if I did, produce a video that proves it.
I'm not. Listen, I'm asking the question because
you said.
Said it. Yes, I know. I did. I did.
You
say
just
that.
said. I went on live and said.
Stop being like that. You're being fun. You always do this when you get sort of cornered in a situation that isn't really a situation. But I just asked the question. You answered it. That's fair enough. No worries.
Thank you.
The only reason I asked it, Chris, was because DT, or down the Rapids guy.
Yeah, he lost his mind.
He said don't quote me on it, but I'm pretty sure he said that Jay was found by a group of hikers. Go check out his video or his comment.
Yeah, he did say that. He did mention, I remember him saying that as well, that Jay was found by a group of hikers. Now, I'm not too sure if he was referring to Chris Tenerife. I actually thought he was referring to Chris Tenerife when he mentioned it. But then you think, hold on, if Chris Tenerife was the head of the search and he has been running that search since more or less the beginning of July, wouldn't DTR know who Chris Tenerife is? So why would he refer to Chris as, some hikers?
Put it this way, on Saturday in the ravine, we were the only people in there.
Yeah, I remember this now.
Yeah.
You'll see from my TikTok, I did a video on Saturday afternoon, and I'm describing exactly the point where the Guardia Civil need to send a military team, a specialist military team.
I remember that. That's true.
And when I left, they closed Masca, and that's reported widely. The next day, there was a guy who's got an excursion business said, Masca's been closed. He heard it from the Coast Guard that the day before a tip-off had been given, which was us.
Oh.
And
I remember that.
Now, do you know what, guys?
So you got to think, look, all right, cool. That makes logical sense. How was you able to give a tip-off if you hadn't been to the area that Jay was in? You can't be confidently certain at that point that Jay is there for you to then go and give a tip-off to the Guardia Civil. Because imagine you'd done that and Jay wasn't there. The resources that they would have had to have wasted for you to be giving them BS information. Like, you would have had to have been extremely confident that Jay's body is 100% there. That is Jay's, it's definitely Jay's, and I'm giving this tip off. The day before they actually go in to retrieve the body. And if you hear how Chris and his team came to the determination of knowing Jay's body was there, is extremely bizarre as well. But this takes me back to what I said to you guys earlier and what I've said to you guys months and months and months ago. After Brad's interview, Chris and his team were adamant that Jay was there and he was not leaving that ravine until they found the body. But as we've already discussed, it conflicts with the 2-week period where nothing happened. Searching that ravine with the sniffer dogs, with the drones, with all of their resources, and literally not a sight, not a sniff, not a scent, nothing. Nothing of Jay.
He was sitting down when you did that video. Didn't you have a baseball cap on? He was sitting down. And you were
I just got back to the car. Right, okay. And the reason why we did that video is because if I had an accident or I got into trouble down there, we had a plan B, an extraction plan. The Guardia Civil were going to come and get me out. But when they came in, if I had an accident, they didn't know if they were picking up 1 or 2 bodies, right? So they were prepared to pick up 2 bodies, just in case I had an accident. And the Guardia Civil were alerted before I alerted them that I'd been offline for too long because I was trying to find Jay. Huh? And then when I came back, I spoke to Luggy, and Luggy's like, fucking hell, you've been offline so long. And I was like, mate, I was fucked down there, yeah? And he goes, I've alerted the Guardia. And I was like, what? He goes, get up there now, put a video online. We need to, document, timestamp this. And he goes, mate, they're already coming in with a rescue mission. I was like, fuck me, mate, I've only just come out. And he was like, yeah, but Chris, you've been offline so long.
Hold on.
I didn't know if something happened to you.
Any sense? I got to pause it right there. This is not making any sense. Just a minute ago, he said that he gave a tip-off to the Guardia Civil, which would have been the day before the Coast Guard mentions to anyone else that the Guardia Civil is going in to retrieve Jay's body because of this tip-off. But on the day they're going in, Chris is also in there again? Like, you're in there again? So you went in there, you got a strong vibe that Jay was in this certain area, the area the Guardia Civil wouldn't search because they believe Jay would have needed a rope and a harness, which makes me question how you got down there. However, you was confidently able to confirm that Jay's body was there, even though you hadn't even seen the body, you hadn't even touched the body, you couldn't be for certain, but you gave the tip-off. They go in the next day, but you're still in there? Or you went back in there? Extremely confused. I mean, it sounds like he's gone back in there again. And when he's gone back in there again, after giving the tip-off, his phone signal died, Buggy the side chick panics and gave Guardia Civil the call and sent them in to rescue Chris. Although Chris never even found the body, and he was the one that was in danger and the Guardia Civil was going in to rescue him, he got out before the Guardia Civil even found him, and they found Jay's body. Just there. And then Sluggy tells him, actually, quickly get out, go and make a video and put it up online. That right there makes no sense to me whatsoever, ladies and gentlemen. And like I said to you earlier on in the video, the only way this can make sense is if Chris was involved in planting Jay's body. I'm sorry to say it, because I don't want to believe that Chris was that guy. But this story from Chris, as well as other bits of information that have been floating across the internet over the past 10 to 11 months, it does make me feel like he could have been involved. So ladies and gentlemen, we're going to leave it there. My blinds are not strong enough for this sun. It's actually ruining the lighting in my living room at this moment in time. But there's so much more to get through in regards to this podcast. And I need to know exactly what you guys are thinking. So leave all of your thoughts down below in the comment section. I will be back again with probably a part 2 of this one. So make sure you subscribe to the channel if you are newly watching. Turn your notification bells on so you don't miss out on future videos. And I look forward to seeing you guys on the next one.